Welcome to the podcast. To learn about key funding trends and market insight, the podcast is co-hosted by Konektid International. Now here's your host, Mike Shanley.
Welcome to the Global Strategy Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Shanley. Today our guest is friend of the show, Christy Hollywood. Christy is a senior federal business development expert with more than 2 decades of experience working at a variety of firms as direct implementers, working for her own firm, Hollywood and Associates, providing consultancy and business development strategy to the federal market. So, Christy, thank you for joining us today to share your insight on the business development implications of the shifting federal funding market.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's definitely a time of much change.
So let's get right into it, Christy. What are, from your perspective, are those key trends shaping federal business development and capture strategy at this point?
Sure. This is it's definitely the fastest rate of change that I've seen since the 90s. To me, it feels somewhat akin to what they might have been going through in the 40s when the market was exploding. And here it's shifting, contracting, and coming up in different pockets. We're also seeing a lot of changes in staffing, both within government, so the folks that we have those longstanding relationships with, as well as our folks at partners. People are shifting around a lot right now. So trying to maintain those relationships is definitely something that we're seeing across the board. Procurement changes likely are going to be coming too. We've already seen notification they're going to pilot consolidation of civilian procurement with GSA, initially with OPM and OMB, but spreading likely across the entire civilian sector. On the grant side, we might see this consolidating HHS or elsewhere. I haven't had any of that confirmed yet. We're hearing a lot of support for firm fixed price more broadly. That might be softened to incentive fee, but we'll see what comes out of that. I think firm fixed prices coming in a very big way, even in pockets where it hadn't been before. OTAs, there's other transaction authorities that some agencies can use, are staying very busy. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. And then AI is everywhere. It's being used on the government side for initial reviews. It's being used on the GovCon side, the contractor side, for lots of things to speed things up. And basically, everybody's just trying to keep up with and stay ahead of the changes.
Great. Let's keep getting into that, and then I'll be sharing in a little bit the exciting updates from GovDiscovery AI and what we've rolled out here. So, Christy, moving along, given that, can you talk a bit about the strategies for competing and winning in this shifting market?
Yeah, I think this is a great time for innovation. We're seeing a lot more risk appetite in many pockets of the government. So I'm expecting to see that expand. In addition, that means they're definitely looking for newer partners in some pockets as well. This is a really great time if you haven't been in the government market to take a look. We're seeing on the flip side of that, with hesitancy or in some cases formal prohibition on discussions with the public or contractors, having those really long-term relationships with your client is really important. And so reconnecting with people that you might not have been staying in touch with well, also really important. Focusing on mission critical support services. So any of your current work or work that you're looking at that could be defined as mission critical, core to the agency's mission, that's going to be really good stuff that is not going to be necessarily terminated for convenience as those cancellations continue to kind of roll across government in different pockets. So think about where those services might be in your sector or your agency. And then everybody's trying to do more with less. So anything you can do to do more with less, whether that's helping your agency counterpart, procurement officials, figure out what contract vehicle, what mechanism is going to make it easiest for them to procure. That's always been a thing. That's critical right now because they're short-staffed pretty much across the board. AI enablement, we talked a little bit about government using AI, but also in your solutions, considering using AI. And as you're doing your business development functions, consider how AI can help you do more with less. I've been really impressed with some of the tools that we've seen across the board, but take a look at those because they're important.
Right. And so you mentioned reconnecting or make sure you keep the connections with the relationships. Are you seeing any disruption in the traditional government sales process where, yes, reconnect if those staff are still at the government, but have the layoffs, the ones that have already happened and then anticipated future ones? Do you see that being significant enough to disrupt that decades-old relationship at the client, at the agency, to learn what their needs are?
Yeah, we've been seeing, especially the waves of retirements. Um, and talking with folks across the industry over the last week or two, um, folks be like, "Oh yeah, so and so was at this agency, and well, he took retirement, so I'm not sure who's there now." So really trying to figure out how to maintain and transition those relationships because a lot of this is happening very, very quickly, without time to plan to have those broader points of contact at an agency or your client.
And that's one thing we're hearing a lot is just the challenges. One of the many challenges is keeping up with the flurry of presidential actions, news releases, staffing changes to make sure your proposal is aligned with whatever the new or updated priorities. It can be really challenging to track all these things. What happened this morning that we want to make sure, we're aligned with, not contradicting the current priorities.
You're right. I'll say, like, you know me, I'm a news junkie, like to a ridiculous extent. I haven't looked at the last three days of EOs, so I'll catch up this weekend. But it's really difficult, and even then, trying to make the relationship between what's coming out and what's in the pipeline, or what does this mean in terms of new opportunities? That's a lot of effort to try to stay on top of, as well as continuing to work your current pipeline, get those proposals and RFIs out, and make sure your capture is happening.
Yeah, I see this as just a very important time for us to continue to focus on our government efficiency from the business development side. And again, we'll get into that in a little bit, but I want to focus more on the opportunities for the audience. I'm especially interested in this new partner, maybe existing partner that, you can really see a growth opportunity here. Could you talk a little bit about more your thoughts on why there might be a good opportunity for those newer partners in this space? And also, I'm interested in timing. What point do we think we might start seeing it? Maybe later this year, a more, the cadence of the federal procurements come out, or really maybe I don't settle or establish.
We're in a CR. So continuing resolution. So that means there's not a whole lot of new money. And so new starts are going to be fewer and further between, but that's honestly, it's kind of normal at this point to have that kind of CR. What is different is I know this administration is trying to shuffle money to different pots. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Um, the CR goes through September. So hopefully we will get a FY26 budget, which will provide some clarity on those things. And I think potentially starting 6 months out from when a new budget would be enacted and folks can start spending it in October. I think that is a really good plan, especially if you're newer to the market. There might be some quick hits between now and then. In general, when we're seeing the market tightening, competition's increasing, but there is that appetite for new players and for new ideas. And that is more than I have seen, like I was saying before, in decades. So that's exciting both for established and new players. Like you've had these ideas that you think would be great. Now might be a good time, or when your particular agency client uh, feels a little calmer, it might be a really good time to kind of broach those, to seed some ideas, share a white paper, those sorts of things, to really percolate that up so that when folks are thinking about what do we want to do next, or how can we address this problem that's been sitting here forever in a real way, they might have that idea at the top of mind.
I'm also,
Um, mhm.
sorry, Christy.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, go ahead, Mike.
I'm also hearing there's a lot of M&A conversations in the foreign
Yes.
assistance market as well as broadly across the government. Given that this has really just been actually, yeah, 2 months or so of the administration, I think in the coming months those announcements will come out. But I think those conversations are in many cases well underway. Yeah, on the M&A side, so I think there'll be a shifting in the partnering landscape as well.
That's very true. I was talking to a former colleague earlier today, and their firm has just finished 2 acquisitions.
They announced them yet, or are those unannounced so far?
I think one's been announced. I
Yeah,
don't know if the other's public yet.
sure.
Um, but yes, there's a lot of that going on, and they're not in the development space. So general GovCon, lots of stuff happening. One of the things that we're also seeing because the competition is increasing, because that M&A activity, because folks who've had a lot of terminations for convenience, or procurements canceled, are getting really hungry. The level of opportunities that the multiplier of opportunities that you need in your pipeline probably needs to be higher than it would have been under normal conditions. So rather than having like 3 times your desired revenue at capture, you might want to have 5. Just because the uncertainty element, as well as that added competition, can make it really difficult. So thinking through that strategically and being able to dig deeper into what's coming up through any means that you have. Um, but yeah, I can talk a little about some specific subsectors if you'd like, and some of the trends that we're seeing there too.
Yeah, Christy, let's get into that. Yeah, a couple of those
Okay.
subsectors within the very large federal procurement
Yeah.
market.
Yeah. So as you know, there's like generally 4 giant buckets of spend. So you've got your information technology, um, all things tech. You've got facilities management and kind of base operations pieces. And then you've got research and development and professional services. So in technology, what I'm really actually excited about is I think we might finally be shifting from band-aids on operations and maintenance of systems to true modernization. That's exciting. We're seeing a lot of AI and AI agents as part of that. Folks are excited about being able to use some custom AI solutions to translate from the old COBOL systems. If you guys have been following Social Security Administration news, COBOL is not just there, it's in a lot of places where they've never gotten full funding from Congress to really migrate from that system from the 80s and 90s or earlier um, to current best practice for technology. So that's exciting. Um, on the facilities management side, I think efficiency, cost efficiencies are going to be the name of the game. There may be fewer facilities, though. We know that they're looking at selling off some of the government GSA properties. So thinking through that too. Research and professional services, right now, times are a little iffy, but I think we may see what I consider the usual cyclical rebound just over the horizon. Thinking back to which administration was it, Clinton or Bush? Maybe before that. But they were doing competitions to outsource government services to save money. Those A76 competitions. I think there's going to be at some point in the next 6, 18, 24 months, a real view of, okay, we're not getting the research and data that we need to support or to help guide policies here. Or we really do need to think about better efficiencies. We need to have consultants come in and help us figure out the process optimization for this huge piece of our agency work. I think that will happen. It's probably not going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months, though. So that's a little strange. There's definitely potential for more challenges, official challenges, things like ARPA-H, DARPA, um, the Severe program for those really innovative, exciting new technologies and products that the government will kind of help walk through the phases of development through different funding tranches. So those are things that I'm excited about, and I think are good opportunities for anybody in the market.
So let's start talking a bit about what this means for business development teams at the implementers. How would you start framing those conversations or that strategy in terms of what's their so what right now?
Yeah. So I think one, it's being able to really figure out how to offer something innovative to your existing clients, because they're going to have to justify every spend more than they have in the past. So being the safe hands, being the safe partner may not be enough anymore. Um, think about if there's an exciting new partner you could bring onto your team. That definitely is one way to do it in a very quick fashion. Um, BD teams also really need to think about how to up their own efficiency while they're trying to plug up that pipeline. I think that's going to be really critical. I know one of my clients, we're seeing lots of opportunities to shift to the right. Part of that's the budget, part of that's uncertainty. Yeah. And that's being seen kind of across the board from what I'm hearing when talking to other BD folks. Um, really trying to keep that qualified pipeline above your normal volume to make sure you're going to have enough revenue coming in to maintain your operations.
So we're talked about the need really to have a larger pipeline with the same or in some cases less staff. What have you seen? Again, we all know what's been going on in the foreign assistance market. What about in the broader federal market? Are you seeing more hiring, maybe not an official freeze, but a pause on new BD hires? Are they hiring, and or have you started to see any layoffs or reductions on those BD teams, again, in the broader federal market?
It's really a mix, I've got to say. Um, some organizations are hiring a lot, are being very cautious about their hiring, and it really depends on the subsectors. In general, we're seeing folks who are closest to the warfighter, DoD, they're still hiring up. There's going to be a huge need to kind of refortify, uh, up, update our ammo kind of stuff at DoD. Those folks who are further removed from the warfighter being a little more cautious. On the civilian side, similarly, folks who are very close to citizen services, some of them are feeling very confident. Those who are more removed from the direct citizen service being cautious. And then you have your agency specific stuff, which is mostly on pause at the moment, but that will undoubtedly change at some point as they figure out what's next and how they may want to reorg. We're seeing some of the education programs are likely being migrated over, I think, to commerce. So really trying to figure out how that might work and seeing what changes are going to be there. So it's very much different pockets.
Question that come in for those of you listening on Spotify or Apple. We do record these live, so always feel free to RSVP for the live ones. The benefit is you can submit some questions. So one's coming in from one of our current clients here, Christy. Would being a longtime government contractor be seen as a negative thing with this appetite for new partners? Is it a zero-sum situation or making the pie bigger and bringing more people in? If so, follow up. How would you recommend overcoming that, approaching that, framing that?
Sure. Sure. Shout out to Paul for the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Yes. So I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I don't think the pie is necessarily getting bigger either. I think it may be a different flavor of pie than we're used to, might be a better analogy. In terms of whether there is a disadvantage to being a traditional contractor, don't think there's a disadvantage to that. I think where it can be perceived as a risk is if you're one of those top 10, top 20 contractors whose names have been circulated and whose contracts are being looked at more carefully. I think that's where the biggest risk is. And that is going to be a challenge for some of them to overcome. I think there may be a lot more subbing on some of those opportunities than we've seen in the past.
will propose, that's another question on
Mhm.
proposal instructions expectations. Will proposal instructions expectations, do you anticipate some changes there? And I'm especially interested in the past performance and how that was so highly valued before. If we're looking more towards innovation and efficiency, does that, I'm not going to say devalue, but maybe lower the the deal breaker level of having that right past performance that we've seen in the past on procurements?
Yeah. Um, yes, there will be changes to what we're seeing in proposal instructions. We're not seeing a ton yet. I will say what I have been seeing at the market research or RFI stage is much more of a broadcasting of that net, putting it out on every available platform. So rather than just coming out from the agency client, it's coming out on GSA, it's coming out on NITAC and NIH, which is broad. Um, so they can get as much information about what's available out in the market as possible. Once we, I'm also seeing, so let me step back. So that's the RFI stage. So during the proposal stage, a lot of what we're seeing is kind of tied to those procurement changes. I think continuing to try to make it faster and simpler for the procurement official, not necessarily for us, um, but continuing to do, okay, do you have any required certs? Do you have experience in technology that would be useful? It might not be the formal past performance that we've seen before, but they're still asking for capabilities, experience, that sort of thing. It'll be interesting to see how they evaluate past performance beyond neutral, if it's commercial experience in a traditional procurement. I think what we're likely going, oh, and then doing multi-stage procurement with oral, still really big thing. I think that makes it really easy for the government side to make their decisions and fairly quickly. Um, I think where we're going to see more change is after the FY26 budget gets passed, where I'm fairly optimistic that we'll see some significant changes to the federal acquisition regulations, which I think we all can agree are well overdue. Um, they've been adding to it every time something significant goes wrong. So it needs some simplification. I think that'll open doors to a lot more partners, as well as make our lives in traditional GovCon much easier. So,
Yeah, so I'm on the PSC, that's a Professional Services Council, the Vision Forecast team that's preparing the vision forecast for 2026 for both the HHS CDC team as well as the DoD AI and cyber team. And Christy, I know you've been involved with them for a while too. One suggestion to any new federal partners on Professional Services Council, great organization on the contracting side to become a member of. So PSC, check out their site and some upcoming events. And if you attend them, I'm sure I'll see you there. Christy, we've been talking a lot about the changes. What about what stayed the same? What will continue in federal procurement, business development the coming years?
I mean, I still think it's going to be its own particular niche. I still think we're going to have to do our deep digging to figure out what opportunities might actually be coming out 12, 18, 24 months down the line, which can be really a big challenge, especially when budgets may not be following regular cycle. A lot of that is relationship management, making sure we stay on top of that, work with folks we know, work through our program staff if we have established programs to really figure out, okay, what are the current needs, what might actually be funded, who are the right advocates, all the capture work that goes underneath that. Really working in partnership with our clients and potential government clients as much as we can, sharing information in a transparent way. And then there's always going to be some kind of formal proposal. It will likely be much simpler and streamlined than we've seen in the past. But for right now, it's still kind of general standard processes unless you're doing OTAs. There's other transaction authorities, which are still mostly DoD.
All right. So as we get close to wrapping up this conversation, what's the so what that you want to leave the audience with?
The big so what is whatever you're doing, try to do it as efficiently as possible. These are going to be lean times for a lot of folks for at least the next 3 to 6 months. So figure out how you can keep clumping up your pipeline in a cost-effective way with things that are actually qualified that you can position for now, because you're going to need to be bidding a lot more than you might have in the past to stay at the same level. And I think trying to figure out how to dig into those details, Mike, is something that you've been working on, if I'm not.
Yeah, and I am excited just to quickly announce the GovDiscovery AI work. What we've been hearing from the market is it's so much administrative effort to track all these changes and really understand the business development implications of what's been going on the last couple months. So that's why we launched this. Our first product is the AI-driven capture research tool. It's a capture accelerator packet that jumpstarts each capture pursuit. The key difference is these are designed not by software engineers, but by federal business development experts, harnessing AI and really bringing in, it's really the success we had with AidConnect and why that was such a great fit for the market. It brought in all of these unique agency-specific data sources. So that's what we're pulling from this. It's not just SAM.gov and FPDS, but what are the key press releases, presidential actions, other non-government sources of information that are relevant to business development? And then what's the so what for each specific capture pursuit? So definitely message me on LinkedIn or email me if you're interested in learning more about that and getting one of those reports generated for your team. Because really that's what you've been talking about here, Christy. It's that efficiency and innovation is what we're really focused on. Organizations are going to need to manage larger pipelines and bid more efficiently with more limited resources. That's at least where they see the market going from our perspective.
Yep, fully agree with that, Mike.
All right. Well, Christy, hope to have you back on the podcast again soon. This was very insightful, and always appreciate your expertise as you really have your finger on the pulse of the federal funding market. And it's an important time to have that insight right now in this shifting market with a lot of significant changes. But there's always those opportunities among those challenges.
No, that's great. And thanks again for having me today, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Christy. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and connect with Mike Shanley on LinkedIn.